There are so many World of Warcraft add-ons that it can be overwhelming to find the best ones, especially when many of their features overlap. What nameplate add-on is best? How do you decide between DBM and bigwigs? The only way you can know is by testing the add-ons out, but that can take a lot of time. Don't worry, I've got your back. In this video, we are going to compare and test 5 different DPS rotation add-ons so that you don't have to. I will be releasing more videos like this and other add-on guides, so make sure to subscribe. If you aren't familiar with them, DPS rotation add-ons are mods that recommend what spells you should cast to increase your damage output. But how do they know what spell to recommend? Without getting too technical, rotation add-ons pull from something called Simulation Craft action lists. These are computer-generated lists which lay out an optimized cast order for each spec. This leads to a few more questions. Are these add-ons good? Can they increase your DPS? To figure that out, I installed the 5 most popular ones based on downloads and I put them to the test. So in the end, I ended up installing Hikili, Max DPS, Ovel, Hero Rotation, and Conflict Rotation Optimizer, or Conro for short. For this test, I wanted a way to compare and score the add-ons. I sat down and thought about what makes an add-on good and how I can measure that. What I ended up with was a cheesy 5-letter acronym that can be used to compare add-ons. The acronym, FACTS, or F-A-C-T-S, looks at the features, author support, customization, testing, and setup of each add-on. Looking at the features is important because it tells you if the add-on provides value to the game. Author support measures whether or not the add-on is up to date, and how well the developer responds to community input and bugs. Customization measures, well, the ability to customize the add-on. Testing, on the other hand, looks at the impact the add-on has on game performance and whether the add-on is useful. In the case of rotation add-ons, testing also includes seeing what impact the add-ons have on damage output. Setup looks at how difficult it is to install and start using each add-on. I then rank each add-on on a scale of 1 to 10 in each category, for a total score of 50. Before I show you the scores for the rotation add-ons, I just want to say that add-ons are created as a labor of love by their authors. By comparing them, I don't want to discount any of that hard work. So please don't take any of these scores as me bashing on any of these add-ons, because I know how much work it can take to develop and to maintain them. Okay, with that off my chest, let's take a look at the features of each of these rotation add-ons. Starting off with Hikili, this is an add-on that places icons on your screen to recommend your next spell cast. The first box in the list is the next suggested spell, followed by the abilities in your rotation. If you had 4 boxes, you could see your next spell cast, and then also the following 3 recommendations too. If you want Hikili to show recommendations on your action bar, you can do that by installing the Spell Flash add-on, and then by enabling it in the display's options. Hikili also detects whether you are in single target or AoE combat. You can see the number of enemies in range in the bottom right corner of your icon. If you want to lock it to single target or AoE, you can click on the minimap button and then select the mode you want. In this dropdown, you can also turn on recommendations for defensive abilities, interrupts, and potion use. The last great feature I want to highlight in Hikili is the ability to import custom rotations. You can set these up from scratch, or you can run simulations for your character and then load them into the add-on. It takes a little bit of setup, and I don't want to get too sidetracked from this review, so let me know if that's a video you would like to see in the comments. So now let's jump over to Max DPS. The way that this add-on makes recommendations is by adding an overlay to your action bar. By default, it will be a white circle for your core abilities and a green one for your major cooldowns. If you want an icon for your next suggested spell, you would need to import the weak aura posted on the add-on's CurseForge page. Max DPS technically supports AoE rotations, but when I tested it on my boomkin, it didn't recommend any cleave abilities. Also, it doesn't make recommendations for interrupts or any other utility spells. However, it does allow you to code your own rotations, but not from a character simulation. Ovel is the third add-on reviewed. From a feature perspective, it has the ability to show recommendations in the form of an icon or an action bar overlay. The Ovel icon box has 4 suggested spells. The leftmost one is for short cooldowns, which are considered to be abilities with a minute or less cooldown. The next box over is for single target recommendations, and is then followed by an AoE suggestion and a long cooldown tracker. While it does track these cooldowns, it does not make any recommendations for interrupts or any other utility spell use. It does, however, allow you to load custom rotations from simulations just like in Hikili. Hero Rotation is the next contender on the list. This add-on shows an icon suggestion, but does not support action bar overlays. It does, however, support AoE rotations and interrupts, but it won't let you customize the default rotation. The last add-on I looked at was Conflict Rotation Optimizer. Conroe adds 3 icon suggestions by default, 1 for your recommended spell, 1 for purges, and 1 for interrupts. It will also show an action bar overlay with nice little indicators like a skull for your damage ability and a bright orange starburst for cooldowns. When you first load Conroe, you will notice that there are button toggles on your screen, which let you switch between burst and full mode, and then also between single target and AoE. When the mode is set to burst, the add-on will let you decide when you want to use your cooldowns. On full mode, it will tell you when to use those cooldowns. So basically, burst mode can be helpful if you want to hold your cooldowns for a particular phase or situation in a boss fight. In regards to custom rotations, Conroe does not allow you to change the built-in settings. That was a lot to take in all at once, so I created this helpful graphic to compare these features. If you want to take a closer look at this or the other graphics I use in this video, you can find a link to them in the description. With all of these features now considered, I crunched the numbers and I gave Hikili a score of 9, max DPS 7, Ovel 9, Hero Rotation 7, and Conroe 8. The second factor I looked at was author support. More specifically, I wanted to see if the add-ons were up to date, how often they received updates, and if the author is active in the community. What I found was that all of these add-ons received excellent support. In addition to being updated, the authors typically responded to issues on CurseForge or on GitHub. Additionally, most of the add-ons had received dozens of updates in the last year. For scores, I gave max DPS a 9, since it had fewer updates in the last year, and then the remaining add-ons received a score of 10. Customization is the third factor I reviewed. I wanted to see if the add-ons let you exclude certain spells, move the frames around, and if they had profile settings for easy sharing between characters. Hikili checked all the boxes by allowing you to control specific spells and also the trinkets that show up. It also allows you to change the size, location, and the number of icons, and then save those settings into a profile. Max DPS allows you to customize the action bar overlay shape and allows you to toggle cooldown recommendations off and on. Unfortunately, it does not come with profile settings. Ovel provides options to customize the appearance and save the changes to a profile. However, it does not allow you to turn off certain spells or items without really diving into the customizing of your rotation. Hero Rotation gives you the ability to change the scale and the location of its icons. It also lets you turn the cooldown recommendations off, but it doesn't have profile options either. Finally, Conroe allows you to change the appearance of the icons and the action bar overlays. It lets you turn spells off and on by major group, like defensives, raid buffs, and movement speed abilities. Unfortunately, it doesn't have profiles built in either. Overall, customizing the appearance of these add-ons is pretty straightforward, but not every mod allowed for fine-tuning spell suggestions or saving your customizations in profiles. Given this, Hikili received a perfect 10 out of 10, and the other add-ons received a score of 8. Alright, now for the moment you've been waiting for. It's time to take a look at how each of these add-ons performed in-game. The first thing I looked at in testing was whether the add-on was lightweight. I wanted to see if they eat up a lot of memory and also processing power. What I found was that Hero Rotation used a lot of memory. In fact, it consumed 58% more than the 4 other add-ons combined. The lowest memory users, on the other hand, were Conroe and max DPS. I also looked at their impact on processing power. I found that while Hero Rotation used a lot of memory, it used significantly less processing power. The two highest CPU requirements were for Ovel and also for Hakili. This is not too surprising because they both have every rotation for every class built in, whereas the other add-ons split that functionality into separate mods. So what do these numbers mean? Well, for most computers, these numbers won't sync you or impact gameplay. But if you're playing on a lower end computer, you may want to consider these numbers when you're choosing an add-on. The second aspect of testing I looked at was damage output. To test this, I traveled to my nearest Covenant Sanctum and hit up the training dummies. I then did a minute and a half of combat without any add-ons on my 209 Boomkin. I turned the add-ons on one by one, and then I tested again. To preface my numbers, I would say I'm an average or maybe even slightly below average DPS player, as I usually prefer to heal. Still, the results of this test were fascinating. Hakili and Conroe both increased my DPS by 1k or 28%. Hero rotation led to a 22% boost, while max DPS and Ovel came in at 17% and 6% respectively. I think those numbers are really interesting that I can go through, I can do a test in a minute and a half, turn the add-on on, and then see those types of boosts. If you think these numbers are fascinating and this video is helping you, make sure you slam that like button so other DPS players can find this information as well. Like I said, I don't really have a mastery of my Boomkin, but I do know the basic rotation and I understand DPS concepts like procs, openers, and cooldowns. So then I wondered, would these add-ons help someone who has never DPS'd before? To test this, my wife was nice enough to give the add-ons a shot. Short of playing the Pandarian starting zone one weekend, she's never played WoW. So I began her test by logging her into the same Boomkin character and told her to mash the buttons and do some damage. She ended up doing 2.2k without any add-ons. We then turned the add-ons on one by one and saw some pretty amazing results. Overall, Hakili boosted her DPS by 77%. She went from 2.2k to 3.9k simply by turning the mod on and pressing the recommended key. She also saw a big gain with Conroe at 59%. Max DPS led to 36% higher damage, and hero rotation came in at 4.5%. Ovel, on the other hand, actually ended up seeing a reduction in damage because it was not making cooldown recommendations for Balance Druid, so she never ended up using Celestial Alignment or Convoke in the pull. Additionally, Ovel had a visual stutter which made the rotation feel slower. This is an issue that's been noted on CurseForge, and I imagine it will be fixed soon. Given all of these tests, I gave Hakili and Conroe the highest scores of 9 out of 10. Max DPS received an 8, followed by hero rotation at 7. Ovel got the lowest score of 5 due to the issues in testing. Moving on to the last category. For the setup, I looked at if the add-ons were easy to install, easy to start using, and how many dependencies you have to download to get going. Overall, all the add-ons can be installed through an add-on manager like Overwolf or WowUp, so that's pretty easy. Other than the few bugs I found in Ovel, the add-ons also work pretty well out of the box. In terms of add-on dependencies, Hakili and Ovel both come packaged with everything you need to start using the add-on on any class. On the other hand, Max DPS and Conroe require you to install at least one additional add-on to work for your class. Hero rotation, on the other hand, requires the most supporting add-ons to get it running at a total of 4. When you install hero rotation and its dependencies, it will also enable an add-on for each class. This means that you'll have 15 add-ons and dependencies for hero rotation running at the same time. So make sure to disable the class add-ons that you don't need. For setup scores, I gave Hakili and Max DPS a 9, Ovel and Conroe an 8, and hero rotation a 7. Now that we have the scores for every category, we can add it all up and see that the winner with 47 points is Hakili. Overall, Hakili had the highest fact score due to its features, impressive impact on DPS and testing, and an endless array of customization options. Conroe also had a strong showing with 43 points, followed by Max DPS at 41, Ovel at 40, and hero rotation at 39. From all my tests and the fact score, I would recommend that you try out Hikili. However, I only ran these tests on one spec and while using training dummies. It's going to be very different if you start to use these things in a raid or in a dungeon. So for that reason, I would encourage that you play around with the add-ons that look the most interesting and then find the one that helps you the most. I look forward to hearing which one you choose in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.